The outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic at the beginning of 2020 totally changed people's ways and styles of living, working, and studying throughout the world. Due to this infectious disease, people had to quarantine at home for months. Factories shut down, people couldn't work, the unemployment rate increased, and GDP decreased. So it means that everyone has been influenced, including me, as high school students. Our ways of study changed, which lead to some mental health problems among students, and the major reason being pressure. At that time, it was the beginning of the winter vacation for Chinese students. However, about 3 weeks later, when school was supposed to restart, the situation was still severe and it was too risky to reopen the school. However, teaching and study couldn't stop. The Education Bureau in China set forth the most effective way to continue to educate the students under that period. So, online classes commenced. The Education Bureau and the schools in China set up different schedules and policy for the online lessons based on the real situations of the different schools and for the various levels of education. For primary school students, many cities decided to let all primary school students to have the same classes online. And also in some cities, primary school students watch their classes on TV to minimize any harms for their eyes. For middle school and high school students, teachers provide these classes through some apps like TikTok, Tencent Meeting, and Zoom. Those apps make online meeting possible that allow all students to participate, while teachers could communicate with students and also check homework. Universities use MOOC, which is an app for university students to study, so that students can watch the lectures delivered by the professors of the different universities. Although our teachers, students, and authorities were trying to minimize the influences brought on by the pandemic, no one solution is 100% perfect. Many exams like IELTS, TOEFL, SAT, and AP were cancelled, delayed, or changed into the online forms. The changes in the classes and exams absolutely had big impacts on students' thought about their studies. Many students felt stressed and became anxious. Take me, for example. I was in grade 11 when the pandemic broke out, and as an international student, I was scheduled to have many exams. However, at any times, many exams were cancelled, especially the IELTS exams. I signed up for many times, but it was cancelled again and again. Every time it was cancelled, my worries and anxious increased about my study, my grades, and my future. For about 2 weeks, I was very upset, easy to be angry, and had no energy for anything. Then, I suddenly realized that it was because of the pandemic, the quarantine, and online classes. But why did these circumstances cause mental health problems? I was lucky because I realized it and tried to tackle the problems. However, some students felt defeated. There were a lot of heartbreaking news coming out during the quarantine. Many students would succumb to mental health diseases like the depression, anxiety disorder, the thought of suicide, and some even really committed suicide. The reason why students will experience such a poor state is simple. The pressure and stress from study, the volatility of the situation, and the sense of confusion about the future. When we face with problems, we must find ways to address them. The pressures are varied. There was some normal pressures from the study, like classes and exams, the pressure from peers, and pressure from family. The first one is the pressure from study. As I mentioned before, there were too many changes in the classes and exams. Maybe one day the authority says that the exam will be held normally. The next day, you will receive the cancellation notice. To deal with it, students need to have a positive attitude by trying to think about the contingencies in case things changed or didn't go as expected. No matter how positive we are, we will still feel worried when the exams changed. So plan B or plan C is important. If we have many options, we will feel less anxious when the changes come. The second is peer pressure. Many of us haven't heard this concept before, but I believe that everyone has experienced it. So, what is peer pressure? Is this a pressure from your peers, like your friends, your classmates, or any people you know that are about your age? Normally, it comes from the comparison between you and another peer. However, during the pandemic, peer pressure could occur frequently. Every time we heard that our friends or classmates achieved good results on homeworks, exams, or any competitions that were available, we felt more worried and stressed. People are more vulnerable because of the quarantine, social distancing, and the unpredictable situations under the epidemic. So when we heard news like that, the level of pressure increased more than we heard the same news before the virus. The way of tackling it is simple but hard to do. That is, to ignore all those things. Everyone is unique and everyone has his or her own goals or dreams to achieve. So no matter what achievements others get, it doesn't mean that you are inferior. It just means that you and another person have different ways to go. I know it's hard to ignore when you hear this news, so just trying to keep your curiosity, focusing on your own goals instead of always being concerned about what others do. The first two kinds of pressure can be controlled by ourselves. However, we can't control the third one, that is, the pressure from family. The pressure from family are separate. For some families who have lower income or live in countryside and remote areas, internet access and electronic devices is a problem. Many students need to walk a long way to find a place where it has the internet. And for some family who only have one phone but have 2 or 3 children who need to have the classes, those students may feel depressed and become anxious because they lose their opportunities to study. And some even feel shame because their family isn't rich. It is hard to change such a family situation in a short period of time, and there's no way to continue the education yet. The other part of the family pressure comes from our closest relatives, especially our parents. In China, many parents have high expectations on their children. They are very concerned about their children's performances and grades in school. However, they don't care or don't believe that students' psychological condition is a vital thing. Every day they just give their children food and drinks and only ask whether their children do well on exams. If their children do not do well, many parents will just blame them instead of finding out why and trying to find out the solutions with their children together. This will not help their children to perform well in the future, but give them more pressure again and again. Even when some students find out there's something wrong in their inner world and searching for help from their parents, some parents still do not think this is a problem. To change the situation, parents should learn to increase their awarenesses on the mental disease. Mental illness is not because people are too weak to face problems. Many issues occurred during the pandemic. Some of the problems have been solved, some are still there. We have to admit that the situation is better every day, and the COVID-19 pandemic will end eventually. However, we can't say that there will never be a similar issue or emergency that will have negative impact on students' study, lifestyles, and mental conditions in the future. We need to plan everything ahead, make our inner world strong, and always look forward so that we will never be defeated by the disasters. Thank you.